In episode 2, Loki starts getting a crash course in the TVA, how it works, all of this so he can go out in the field. And he has to go out in the field because more hunters have gone missing, this time in 1985 Oshkosh, Wisconsin. TVA agents entered a tent at a Renaissance fair and were ambushed by this variant. In fact, the variant actually kidnapped one of them. So Loki, Mobius, Hunter B-15, they all get together and Hunter B-15 starts giving a debriefing about what they're walking into. And when Mobius told Loki that he could help because they were looking for him, what he meant by that is they were looking for a variant of Loki. There have been tons of variants of Lokis throughout the history of time. So it's not like they're looking for the Loki that we know. But every variant of Loki is just a little bit different. And it's obvious to everybody that a lot of people don't want Loki in the field, mainly Hunter B-15. But Mobius points out, we haven't caught this variant yet, and having inside information like Loki would really help us. So the group packs up and heads to 1985 Oshkosh, Wisconsin. When they enter the tent, though, there's really not much to see. On top of that, they have to move quickly because the timeline is about to branch off into another timeline. But as they're packing up to leave, Loki says, wait, what I see here is a scheme. You guys are underestimating the Loki, which means you're going to get devoured by them. While Loki continues to draw this out, Hunter B-15 says, we don't have time for this. He's stalling. But Mobius isn't ready to just give up on him, thinking that he might be onto something. He does tell him, though, hurry this up. So Loki tells the group that the variant wants them to look for the missing Hunter. If they walk out of that tent, it's probably a trap and they're going to get ambushed. Because this Loki knows that I'm stronger than him. And what he believes is that together we can overthrow and rule the TVA. But that's not what I want. I have a new purpose. I'm a servant of the sacred timeline. And knowing what I now know about his tactics, I can catch this variant. But I need some reassurances. He tells Mobius that what he needs is to know that he won't be completely disintegrated once the job is done. He also wants a meeting with the timekeepers. Mobius thinks about it for a little bit, but then says, nah, he's lying. There's nothing out there. Pack up and let's go back to the TVA. They put down the reset charges, reset the timeline, and then head back. But when Mobius gets back, he's in a little bit of hot water. He meets with Ravonna Renslayer. She was actually the judge that presided over Loki's case. And she isn't happy. Because sending Loki out of the field really blew up in Mobius's face. He starts going through all the reasons why it wasn't a good idea in the first place, but he says, hold on. Here's what we found out about the variant. He likes to stall, which means the other one likes to stall. And eventually, we'll catch the variant doing the same thing we caught Loki doing. Because understanding this Loki helps me get closer to the other Loki. Ravonna reminds him that Loki, throughout the entire timeline, has always been the same person. A backstabbing, conniving, mischievous god. And Mobius says, well, what if he wanted to change? And Ravonna says that that would have been up to the timekeepers, who are very involved in this case. They want to catch this variant very, very badly. They're monitoring every aspect of the case. Ravonna then gives Mobius one last chance with Loki and sends him on his way. But just because Mobius is still convinced that this is a good move doesn't mean he's not pissed off at Loki. When he walks out, he's confronted by Loki, who just keeps blabbing on and on about how he can help and why he's there. And finally, Mobius just cuts him off and says, you're here because I figured that you would want to catch the superior Loki. And with a shot at the ego, Loki starts defending himself a little bit, saying that he's actually been playing a game of his own all along. He's 10 steps ahead. And Mobius says, what, like charming you away in front of the timekeepers and then overtaking the TVA, something like that? And while Mobius is still convinced that Loki can help, he now doesn't trust him. So he has Loki go over every one of the variant's case files, which is really tedious work. And after a while, Loki just gets bored, and he goes to the librarian and tries to get the files on the start of the TVA. But everything he asked for is classified, everything except his own file. So he decides to look at it, and he sees the destruction of Asgard. But that's when he sees that there is no variant energy detected in it, and he has his eureka moment. He grabs the file and excitedly heads down and finds Mobius eating lunch, and he destroys that lunch, but he does it for a greater purpose. He uses it as a model to show that the variant is hiding in doomsday scenarios. Because when the variant shows up in a different place, it changes the timeline. But it's not going to change the timeline if it's a doomsday scenario. Nothing the variant does is going to change the fact that everybody there is going to die. So to avoid detection, the variant is hiding out in these doomsday scenarios. And at first, Mobius doesn't believe it, but they decide to test the theory by heading to Pompeii. When they get there, Mobius just wants Loki to do something small, like make a bird noise. But Loki goes all out, jumping up and down, saying he's from the future. Everybody there is going to die because of a volcano. And when the volcano goes off and Mobius looks at his little meter, nothing has changed, which gives credence to Loki's theory. Now all they have to do is find out which doomsday scenario this variant is located in, which is going to be difficult because there's a ton of doomsday scenarios. And they start looking over file after file, but after a while, they just need a break. So they head to the cafeteria and they start talking about how ridiculous the whole timekeeper scenario is. 3 lizards created the timeline. They're keeping track of it. They created all of this. And Mobius points out that if you were to ask Loki about where he came from, Asgard, it sounds just as ridiculous. But through this conversation, Mobius remembers that child from the 1500s and remembers the gum. And that could be the key to finding this variant. They head to the archives and find the gum and figure that if you can match up the gum's timeline with Doomsday scenarios, you might be able to find out where this variant is located. And it takes a little bit of time, but Loki finds it. 2050 Alabama, there was a hurricane that decimated everything in its path, and that's got to be where this variant is located because it has everything you would need. They have a giant department store there with food and shelter. So Mobius takes this theory to Ravonna, who doesn't think it's a good idea to send Loki back into the field, but Mobius is insistent that in his gut, they're going to find the variant at this location. So she reluctantly approves it, but says, if it doesn't go well, there's not much I can do for you. Mobius then grabs Loki, Hunter B15, and she starts giving the debriefing about what they're walking into. The good news is the variant shouldn't be expecting them, but this is a Class 10 Doomsday scenario, and anybody could be the variant, so they have to keep a lookout. They then head to 2050, walk into the department store, and split up, with Loki going with Hunter B15. She doesn't want to let him out of her sight. And they start looking through the variant, and it doesn't take long for them to find it. It's this guy looking at plants in the middle of a hurricane. When Hunter B15 walks over to him, though, he grabs her arm, and then he drops to the ground, because the Loki has transferred from the guy's body to Hunter B15's body, and now Hunter B15 is taken over by this Loki variant. A short time later, though, the variant switches bodies again to a worker in the store. And while Loki and the variant are chatting about who's the better Loki, Mobius and his group end up finding the missing Hunter. She's in a supply closet just repeating over and over again, "It was real, it was real." And when Mobius brings up calling the TVA, she says, "No, don't. Because I told them where the timekeepers are located. I told them everything." And when she says that, one of the hunters tries to get in touch with Hunter B15, who is just waking up from getting knocked out by the variant. The variant, meanwhile, is with Loki. And that's when Loki proposes to the variant the very thing that he told the TVA this variant would propose to him, teaming up. Loki says, "We team up and we can take over the TVA." But the variant shuts him down, saying, "No, I have no interest whatsoever of taking over the TVA." And Loki says, "Well, if you don't want to take over the TVA, then what do you want?" And the variant says, "It doesn't matter, you're too late." And Loki starts pointing out all the reasons why he's not too late. But that's when he notices a bunch of reset charges and says, "Oh, that's your plan, to just blow us up." But the variant is gone. And that's because the variant changed bodies into a much bigger person, and that person is throwing Loki around. As the two are fighting, Hunter B15 links back with Mobius, and now they're frantically looking for Loki. Now, Loki's getting his ass kicked, and eventually that variant steps to the side for the Loki that is orchestrating all of this. And when that Loki takes down the hood, it's a female Loki. She tells Loki, "This isn't about you." But the stall tactic that the female Loki used works because the charges start going off, and suddenly all of the reset charges start disappearing. In effect, this completely bombed the timeline. There are a ton of different multiverses branching off from one another. When Renslayer sees it, she actually grabs her baton and heads out in the field. But back in the department store, the female Loki opens up one of the portals and then waves goodbye to Loki. But with the portal still open, Loki is staring at it. And that's when Mobius and Hunter B15 and his group end up seeing him and are screaming for him not to go through. But Loki ends up ignoring their orders and passing through. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.